Also, I have some freebies and some other things that I'll share with you at the end. So I'm so excited that the day is finally here. I think it was back in May where I had this idea of the world is such a crazy place. And I don't know what leaders are really challenged by today. I had a hunch that a lot of the qualities of effective leadership today were very different than 18 months to 2 years ago. So I was listening to a podcast from an executive coach, and this coach said that she looked at doing this project where she talked to 100 people in 30 days for 15 minutes and asked them like one question. And I'm like, wow, I wonder if I would do that, what would the information that I would get? So over the course of June and July, I talked to, I have to be honest with you, it was almost 100 people. Some people I wasn't able to kind of get face to face. So they were kind enough to either text me or email, but I really talked to a lot of people. And it's people such as yourselves. Some of you participated in that project. Some of you know me through other projects or other organizations that we've worked on, customers, clients. And I'm really happy that you're able to join us today. And the purpose is to talk about the top leader challenges and more specifically, what you can do about it. So let me advance my slide here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Michael Krumpak. I'm an executive coach. I started my company L4 Learning Solutions about 2 years ago. And this is actually the first webinar that I'm doing. So I'm really hoping that you'll let me know a little bit about you, a little bit about some of the things that you're looking for so that I can do my best to customize the content and the delivery of this. So I have enough content for about 3 hours, and I'm thinking that 3 hours in front of a Zoom is a little bit horrible, although lately I've been required to be on meetings that have been a lot longer than that. So what I thought we would do is I would give you kind of a deep dive on some of the most critical challenges. Interestingly enough, it works out to be the top 5. So I reached out to those of you who had registered for the webinar, and I wanted to get a sense of like, what are you looking for and what would be helpful? And I'll share a little bit of what the feedback is that you've shared with me. And I'll also give you an opportunity to give some additional feedback. But the roadmap is for today. I just want to kind of get a little sense about you. I want to give you, I'm not a big sales pitchy kind of guy. So I absolutely hate when you sign up for webinars to get something and 90% of it is a sales pitch. So I give you my commitment and promise that I won't do that. However, we do have some pretty exciting things that I wanted to at least tease or throw out there. And if you're interested, I'm happy to talk with you later about some of the new learning solutions from L4 Learning Solutions. Going back to the roadmap for today, not only what are the challenges, but what is it that you can do? It can be so overwhelming. And the people that spoke with me were everyone from C-suite executives to high potential directors, vice presidents, managers, aspiring managers, and individual contributors. And pretty much it was interesting. The feedback and the comments and the reactions that I got were very similar across the board. It's like employees are very frustrated and challenged because they're not getting the type of leadership that they need in today's organizational environment. And leaders are frustrated because they don't know what to do. So it was interesting how all the stars kind of aligned and connected. So I'll tell you about those challenges, what you can do. And my style is pretty casual. If you have a question, you can either type it in the chat box, you can raise your hand, and I will make sure to save some time at the end to, if you have any other questions. And if we find that things maybe are taking a little bit too long, I just ask your permission to put some things in a parking lot And then later on, we will follow up to make sure that all your questions are answered. And the biggest thing, drum roll, please. Anyone? Okay, that's my drum roll. One lucky participant from today will be the winner of a new program that I'm in the process of developing that will launch in January called Catalyst Plus. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what that is, but that is an investment that's worth over $4,000. So I'll tell you more about that. So now on to the sales pitch. And again, I promise to be brief, but L4 Learning Solutions, my background is in industrial organizational psychology, and I've been fortunate to be in the field of learning and development for over 30 years. I know I look super young, but I'm actually very old. So what I really enjoy doing and helping clients do is high potential leadership development. And that comes out into a lot of different ways. There's executive coaching. A lot of my executive coaching is with organizations that are trying to get leaders to the next level, or individual managers or directors that are trying to get promoted to that next level, and they keep getting passed over, and there's something going on underneath it. So through the executive coaching, we talk, we explore, we discover. And I'm happy to say that if you look at some of my website testimonials, there's a lot of people that have actually been moved on to another level or been promoted. The White Glove Leadership Cultivation is basically a one-on-one customized leadership development experience that includes a lot of assessment, personal development planning, executive coaching, and training. And then I also, with my psychology hat on, do some psychometric testings. I'm a big fan of the Hogan, and part of that Catalyst Plus is I'm going to give you a suite of all the Hogan leadership assessments, which is a great way for you to understand if you have some hidden strengths, maybe you have some derailers. It looks at your motives. It looks at what could be causing you to possibly derail in times of stress. It's just an amazing, amazing instrument. And I have a lot of others as well. Lately, it's been a lot of teamwork and team building, and then also, a little virtual learning. We're building out a new virtual learning program that'll launch next year. So hopefully that wasn't too much information. Some of the problems that we have, so I won't read all of this, but if organizations don't really have ready now leaders, they don't have a strong pipeline to move into the next level. That's something that I'm really passionate about, working with those leaders and organizations to get those ready now leaders. So if, heaven forbid, a leader has to move on to something else, it's not, oh my gosh, what do we do for a year to try to find that replacement? We have those people in line. I do program design, facilitation, a lot of work lately on culture and engagement. Everybody is just saying that no one is engaged, and I've been fortunate to do a little bit of traveling lately, and it's so interesting the types of service that you get from like hotels and restaurants. It's so different right now. And I think a big part of it is people are still doing what they did in the past, thinking it's going to work. And as a result, engagement is not where it needs to be. So engagement is super important. And then another area or other problems is, how do you present virtually? So that's one of the actual top challenges that we'll go through today. So I've had the privilege and honor to work with a lot of different organizations. Some of you on the call, you've worked with me at some of these companies. So if you're interested in getting some additional support or anything I can do to help you, maybe I could put your logo on this slide one day. So related to these top challenges, knowing what those top challenges are and not being able to actually develop around those challenges is pretty much useless. So I put together a new ebook called Foolproof Development Planning. It is a free tool. It's on my website right now. We can perhaps get you a copy if you just send me a note. But it's a great, great tool to develop around those things that are important today. So again, it all connects, hopefully. We have 10 challenges, things that you need to do, and then how do you develop to figure out which of those 10 challenges are most important and most critical for your success. So why don't we just kind of open up the chat? I'm just kind of curious, where are you calling from? So where are you connecting? Where are you zooming from? City and state, if you would. And you can just put that in the chat pod and you can just default that so it goes to everybody. All right, DC is definitely in the house today. Thank you guys for joining. Reston, Virginia. Chevy Chase, Maryland. We have some New York, Hilton Head. Okay, I think Candace takes the award for the, at least it sounds like the nicest place. Some more in DC, and I hail from Fort Lauderdale. So thanks for letting us know a little bit of where you are. Before I go into the top challenges, I just want to pause for a moment to see, is there anything that, any questions that you have or any concerns or anything that you'd like to share kind of before we dive into this? Okay, well, you can always add anything that you want into the chat pod. So I wanted just to get a sense, and thank you for those of you who responded to the pre-webinar survey. I wanted to see what you were looking for. And here's what you told me. You want to hear something new. You want to learn something new. You want some ideas. But I also heard from a few people that you'd love to network. So we've opened up the chat. So if somebody says something interesting, or you're like, hey, I wonder what Robert's doing in New York. New York has to be a crazy place these days. You can send a chat message to Robert or anyone else. And then also, how do you lead the non-technical dysfunction? So not really the technical skills about how you perform a task, but how do you lead at more of a leadership development level? And if I didn't get that right, I ask you to chime in and let me know. So given the context of what we're talking about with these 10 challenges, is there anything else that you'd like to kind of throw out before we get started? And you can put that into the chat pod. Sounds great. Thank you, Cheryl. Can I just see a thumbs up from everyone if you're good? It could be, okay. Some of you used the little icons. Great, thank you. All right, so last sales pitch / freebie. The Catalyst Plus program includes the Hogan Leadership Assessments, 3 months of one-on-one executive coaching, the ebook that pretty much everyone's going to get for free, but I wanted to at least, throw out a value there. And also a new book that I'm putting together that should launch by the end of the year. It's a daily flip book / calendar that gives you quick hit tips on ways that you can either lead yourself, lead your team, and lead your organization. So it's not out yet, it's in the works, and I'm happy to share that with you in the future. All right, so here is my request of you. I ask that you keep your cameras on. So those of you that may not have your cameras on, please turn them on and keep them on. If there's any background noise, I just ask that you mute your microphone when you're not speaking and open up the mic. I'll probably mute mine and then start talking and forget. So you have permission to yell, scream, kick at me. So I open up my microphone again. And like I said, please submit your questions as we go. And also, let's have an opportunity to kind of network and get a sense of who is on the call today. All right, so the format for today, we have the chat pod. You've already demonstrated that. We have one poll and questions along the way. So here's the deal. 100 people were asked one question. What is the #1 challenge of leaders today? And one of the things that I thought was really interesting is Peter Drucker, who has been around for, his work has been around for a long time. He's a famous author. He's an educator. I found this quote the other day and I'm like, this is exactly what we're talking about. So management is all about doing things that are right. Leadership is very different. It's about doing the right thing. Do any of you have any comments, or is this something that you agree with? Is there something that you think is under that? I'm going to ask one person just to kind of open up your phone and or your microphone and perhaps give a thought of what you think about this quote from Mr. Drucker.
I'm happy to go. Cheryl Wood.
Thank you, Cheryl. And as you guys go, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself and sort of who you are before responding, that would be excellent.
Cheryl Wood, Chevy Chase, Maryland, Professor GW, independent consultant. My whole thing about this quote is it's sometimes hard with the different generations to determine what is doing the right thing. Everybody has a different perspective.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Cheryl, of why you think it changes by generation?
Well, we all have different values, upbringings, backgrounds. We're so diverse that I think what one might think is right, somebody else might think is wrong. Therefore, you can have a clash in managing people and a disagreement on what is right. And you can both be passionate about your opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I think throughout our career, if you start as a junior person, you're trying to figure out, how do I do these things? What's the right way of doing it? But then along to your point, you layer in your values and your principles and your motives and looking at the values and the vision mission of organizations. And then throughout, it's like, okay, wait, now I'm expanding my portfolio of my values, my capabilities, my skills. How do I then figure out how to apply all this at the right time and in the right environment? And I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about how this plays out in the virtual setting in the future of or later in the webinar. So great, thank you, Cheryl, for that point. So going into the top leader challenges, my objective was really to determine what are the pain points. And I want to be able to at least provide guidance to help close the gaps. I try to provide some content through Instagram. I have a couple articles on LinkedIn. It's things that are personally interesting to me that I like to share with others. And this is one thing where I'm like, hey, if there were 10 things that we could find out that were absolutely essential for today's leaders, what would they be? And what could I do to provide some guidance and resources to do it? So it really was about helping me understand so that I could hopefully help others more in the future. And then the introduction was, I knew that the leadership challenges, and I'm looking at the first box on the left, I knew that they were different. I knew they were more complex, and I knew that something was very different. The application of those capabilities has to play out a little bit differently. So that's really where I was very curious to try to find what those top challenges were. And the focus, as I heard from everybody, the challenges were really about, what do I need to do for me personally? What are ways that I can lead my team? And for those of you that have a little bit more senior level experience, how can I kind of take these challenges and look at how not only I lead within my organization, but what can I do to inspire, to educate, to facilitate change throughout the entire organization? And like I said, the methodology was pretty simple. This wasn't a huge psychological assessment. It was 15 minutes of quick conversations about what are the biggest challenges. I pulled together the results in August, and then I'm sharing them with you today. So rather than waiting to the end, I've already have these in some of the communication that we've shared, but these are the top core challenges of leaders today. So if you look at number 10 through 5, it seemed like you were interested in that. So I'm happy to give you a couple ideas and thoughts on what you can do. But with your permission, I'd like to really focus on the first 5, starting with number 5 and work on our way up to number 1. So number 5 was about providing honest feedback? How do you just have conversations with employees to make sure that they're aligned with your goals, to make sure that your expectations are clearly communicated and everyone's aligned? How do you lead people in today's environment? It's face-to-face, it's remote, it's hybrid, it's international. It's like you can't just walk into the workstation or office right next to you and talk to people. It changes the whole dynamics of what we as leaders need to do to engage these teams. So we'll talk about number 4, how do you lead those remote teams? And then number 3 was a really, really big one, leading change and cultural transformation. And pretty much, I think this works out to like 30% or so said that this was a top change. And then number 2 is something that I don't think we really use the term, or at least I haven't heard it that much, about polarity management. But we'll talk through what that is. And then finally, the number 1 need is to create an engaged culture. And that in itself, we could spend an entire day, an entire webinar, an entire week on ways that you can do that. So again, I just want to manage your expectations. We'll spend a little bit more time on items 5 through 1. And then as time allows, we'll go through the final 5. But like I said, I'll make sure that you have something that you can at least think about that's aligned with each of these 10 core challenges. So if you're with me and that sounds good, can you give me a yes typed in the chat pod, please? And I think someone just joined us. Shri, thank you for joining us. Happy that you're here. All right, I got some yeses, so that's good. And like I said, I sent out these challenges and said what's important, and basically is the top 5. So now I'm going to ask Shane, my co-host, to launch our first poll. And basically, I just want to know, like, why are you here? Are you trying to help your organization? Are you trying to do something that can help your direct reports on your team? Are you here to help yourself, which is not a selfish thing? Or that just doesn't fall into play? Maybe it's C, something else. So the poll is open. I am going to give you 5 seconds to complete the poll, and then we will display the results. So what describes your need today? You're trying to help your company, your organization? Is it your team, or is it all about you? All righty, let's close the poll and let's take a look at what the results are. Okay, survey says, you bunch of selfish people. You are here to help yourself. I think that's great, because in my mind, you have to really help yourself, educate yourself, understand what these challenges are, understand which of those challenges are you doing some really good things that maybe you can dial them up a little bit more, which of those things that maybe are need to develop a little bit more. So great. So about 82% said that you're here to help yourself. That's great. And then it looks like it was tied, 9% you're here to try to help your organization and 9% your team. So my goal is hopefully everyone will get a little bit of something that can help you, but I'll definitely keep in mind that you're looking for things to help yourself. So again, due to the interest of time, we're not going to spend a lot of time planning. This is not a workshop. This is a webinar. So we'll talk about the challenges. I'll give you a couple of my solutions, and then I'm really excited to hear what other things you're doing, what other things you're reading or seeing that can really help build today's leaders. So let's start out with number 5. So one of the things that I'm working on is a book about how to have honest conversations. And me personally, I found that so many people, for whatever reason, maybe they don't want to damage a relationship, maybe they don't want to be critically, brutally honest, but so many people out there are not providing honest feedback. And I heard a lot of this from the 100 people that I spoke with. And here are some solutions that I was able to pull together. And some of these solutions I've kind of like made up and pulled for some things that I've done over the year. years. And some of them I try to look at what some of the best are doing right now. So the first thing was something that I found from Harvard Review. And it's pretty basic, but I think it's so important just to ground us at some of these fundamentals. You cannot have honest feedback if you haven't figured out what is the goal? What is it that you're trying to do? What is it that your team members are trying to do? And then kind of the next step is having not just a need, but a truly genuine desire to achieve that goal. And then finally, the third part here is sharing what's going well and sharing what's not going on. So basic coaching. So honest feedback, it really starts with having a goal, having the desire, and then giving the positive feedback balanced with the feedback for improvement. So let me just ask a quick question in the chat pod. What type of feedback do you think lasts? And by lasts, I mean it kind of stays with us in our brain. Positive feedback, or let's call it negative feedback. I prefer to say feedback for improvement or feedback to do things even better. But what do you think is the feedback that when we receive it, it sticks with us emotionally long? Is it the positive feedback or negative feedback? Positive, positive, negative, positive, authentic and radically candid, okay? Constructive, delivered in a positive way. All right, so we got a little bit of everything. Yeah, actually, according to neuroleadership and neuroscience, the positive sounds really good and we feel good, but the feedback that is negative, especially if it's delivered in a way that's not constructive, it lasts with us 7 times longer than the actual positive feedback. So just thinking of that, how are you able to balance more ways to give positive feedback, but still realizing that we have to be honest and we have to be able to give feedback for improvement. So of course, part of giving positive feedback is having really good performance expectations, performance targets, and regular check-ins. A lot of times people are, I just talked to a colleague that I used to work with who's been working from home pretty much for the last 18 months. And he shared with me, I never hear from my boss. I'm basically told if I'm doing everything fine, assume that all is well. And I don't know about you guys, but my personal thought is if you don't receive the feedback, then you could be doing something that is completely wrong and you keep doing it wrong or incorrectly because you just don't have that feedback for improvement. So it's really important to build that. For those of you, I think it was 9% trying to help your organizations, number 3 is one that's a little bit more high level. So develop a coaching mindset and a culture. So it's actually putting together a strategic plan of how do you disseminate communication, how often do you do check-ins, and really just building this feedback for improvement, feedback for engagement, and just getting people to actually share feedback through talking around. The fourth one is gathering perceptions and feedback. A lot of new leaders that I work with, I feel like whenever someone comes to them and says, hey, I have a problem with Johnny, he's not doing his job. They run to Johnny and say, Johnny, I just got some feedback. You need to fix some things. And there's this model that I found that's really, really helpful. When one person comes to you and says, hey, I have a challenge with one of your employees that you lead, I like to call that a hunch. It's like, all right, one person said it's a hunch. It could be true. It might not be true. The second time you find either you see or someone tells you about that type of feedback, that becomes a trend. So it's like, okay, something isn't smelling too right here. I need to kind of keep my eyes open and see if this is going to become a problem, or maybe these are just 2 crazy situations that happened. And if you see it or you hear it 3 times, then I like to say that is solid evidence. And that's the type of feedback that we should be sharing with employees so they know that, hey, there's something going on. Other quick solutions, not to spend too much time here, leading by walking around. And as I said before, what gets noticed gets repeated. So if you see someone doing something great, simple as, hey, I thought you did a great job running that meeting or a great job doing that analysis. Thank you so much. That's important because we're able to now do these 10 other things with our teams because you did such a great job. What gets noticed gets repeated, but also what doesn't get noticed may also be repeated in a bad way. So if you notice it and don't correct it, it can become a problem. So let me just pause here and just check in terms of honest feedback. What are some of those things that you're seeing or some of the things that you're doing that demonstrate really strong, effective, I like to call it legendary leadership around providing honest feedback?
I can go.
Thank you, Perry.
No problem. My name is Perry Fader. I am a student of Professor Woods at GW in Washington, D.C. And I, being a college student, and I'm in a lot of different groups, which is really, really awesome because I get to see these types of situations play out in many micro situations very often. And I find that in a group situation, I am very assertive and typically too honest. And especially as a woman, people associate that with B-wordness. So I find that I have that issue in groups where we have the least amount of communication and somewhat culture outside of the group, because when we were meeting up and I'm being assertive, it wasn't being balanced with how's your day going, or there was no outside socialness. So I found that it's kindness and acknowledging what people are doing well is really, really important. Also establishing a rapport or some kind of friendly nature that I think dilutes and softens the blow of the honesty.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Very, very insightful. And there's a lot to unpack with that. First of all, yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of new research about gender biases with performance management. And, if a female is assertive, we'll go to Perry's word, the B word, or whatever you want to call it. And if a male says the same thing, it's like, oh, okay, that's appropriate. They're just trying to get results. So yeah, being aware of just the gender differences. And another interesting point that I learned recently, and we won't talk too much about this, but females in the workplace tend to get more feedback around their personality and their work style. Males in the workplace tend to get more feedback on the actual tasks that they do and more of how they manage projects and how they lead. So it's really interesting. So the takeaway for me is if someone is giving you feedback about your personality and you feel like, hey, that's nice, but I really want some feedback on how I can do things a little bit differently and be better, to push back and do that. And the other thing I really like, Perry, what you said is building a rapport. And this is related to some of the other challenges that we'll talk through, but now more than ever, since many of us are looking at little boxes of videos all day, and we don't really have that face-to-face interpersonal interactions with everyone, it's incredibly challenging, and it's even more required to take time to build rapport. We'll talk about what I call is engineering what naturally happens organically. And a great way to think about this is there's no water cooler that we can walk to. There's no coffee machine that we can all hang around and do some chit chat. So what are the things that you can do, whether you lead people, whether you're an individual contributor or a follower, just to kind of maintain those connections and build the rapport? And I really like what you shared, Perry. So thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Let's go to challenge number 4. So, here it is. So engineer what happens organically to enhance communication. So if you, if you have been someone who has stayed in your office and didn't really walk around and work with people and manage them, I'm sure managing virtually is a huge challenge. And the thing that I like to say is engineer what happens organically and try to embed that into new processes that you put together to help you collaborate more effectively across your group. I remember I worked in Washington, D.C., and my manager was in London. I think there was like a 6-hour time change. And it was so interesting. He would just send me little chat messages or little emails. Hey, thinking about you. Hope your project is going well. Or I know you have a big presentation or training event coming through. Please call me tonight if you want to talk through it. It was like, I wasn't able to be in front of him all the time, but he leveraged the technology to reach out and do kind of touch points. So it's like, again, you have to over engineer what normally happens naturally when you're walking around in the office. The other thing, and this is based on a lot of best practice research, I believe this is from Forbes, where you want to shift your leadership mindset from I am your leader to let's co-create together. It's not really about who's right and who's wrong and taking tasks or orders. It's all about, hey, this is the goal for the project. I want us to figure out the best way to do this. So what can I do as your leader to co-facilitate the creation of this project? So it's leaders rolling up their sleeves and getting a little bit more involved in the actual process. Another big thing that's happening is there's like a lot of conflict, and it's even harder to deal with that conflict when everything is virtual. I mean, think about it. If Jamie does something to me that I don't like, I can easily fire her off an email and say, hey, I really don't like what you did. If she's sitting in front of me, it's a little bit different. I may not be so direct or not be so assertive. So conflict is really an important thing that as a leader, you have to manage. And one of the things that I love to do in my one-on-ones is I always ask 3 questions. How are you doing? How's the team doing? And what can I do to help? That's the 3 questions I ask after every interaction with employees. And that question about how is the team, there's a lot of follow-up questions that can be under there. And that's a great place to determine if there's any conflict or any challenges. The other part of leading remotely today is dialing up your transparency. So being incredibly direct, being over communicative, anything that you can do as a leader to decrease uncertainty, because if there's uncertainty, people tend to fill in the gaps, and some of the gaps that they come up with are not always the best. So increasing transparency. And finally, the last one before I'll ask for maybe a comment or reaction from someone other than Perry or Cheryl, is to ensure that the common goals are understood. This sounds so fundamental, but things change fast, and it's really important to calibrate and make sure that the goals that you have for either yourself, your team, or your organization are timely, up to date, and understood. And the more that you can create an environment where teams feel part of something bigger, the more that's going to drive engagement. And I've always loved the story of, this is something that happened at NASA in the 50s. There was a janitor that was mopping the hallways at NASA, and someone went up to him and said, what are you doing? And he didn't say that I'm mopping the floors. Does anyone know what he said?
Making sure the mission to moon is successful, or part of the mission.
Yeah. Thank you, Shri. It's like, I'm not cleaning the floors. I'm helping to ensure that we can put a man on the moon. So it's taking the work that all your team members do and connecting that feeling, the emotion, so that they feel that they're part of something bigger. And that's how you drive engagement, and that's how you shape a culture. So thank you for that. Shri, anything else that you'd like to share with this, or anyone else that would have a comment about leading remote and dispersed teams before we move on?
Yeah, Mike, the only comment I would make, and I'm sure everybody sees a flavor of it, these last 2 years since the pandemic unfolded has put everybody upside down in our values and the way we've seen the world, our community, society. So when I think of our workplace ethics and behavior, even that has taken a big turn, if you will. So when I look at how teams perform in a hybrid fashion, everybody's now in their homes or basements and home offices working. So there's a sudden social disconnect that they're experiencing. It's mental, it's behavioral, and in multiple dimensions affecting how they think, process. And the absence of social connection can create an unexpected feeling of I'm left alone, I'm not there to talk to someone, engage with others. And engagement is so important for our well-being. So when I look at teams, the need to have clarity, to be able to have a virtual cup of coffee with their colleagues or your superiors or your bosses, whoever they feel comfortable talking, and being able to communicate authentically, normally, without being judged, without being, reprimanded, I think is even more important now. And that level of candid behavior is what manifests into trusted relations. And I think that trusted relation is what I see developing a organic yet authentic enhanced communication that looks like a grassroots movement, because these things have to come from inside. You cannot force them from the outside.
Yeah, definitely. And those of you that work for organizations that maybe you don't have a process or you don't have a lot of role models around, it's just stepping up to the challenge as a leader and realizing that it's tough working by yourself. It's tough staring at little boxes all day. And we want to make sure that the workplace is as healthy and feeling less stressed and committed and aligned to putting the man on the moon. So yeah, paying attention to that is super important. And I love, Shri, what you said, having a virtual cup of coffee. It's like, hey, here's the coffee. Let's meet from 8:30 to 9. And, let's just kind of talk. And leaders that get a sense of knowing, hey, what's important in your life? What's going on right now that you think I can know? And, there's a line between kind of crossing it, but everything is so blended right now. I mean, my dog could come walking through the door here and, hey, Michael has a dog. So we all see so many things in other backgrounds, and there's not this distinction between work and home. Everything is so integrated. So playing into that and paying attention to your employees, doing things to engineer what normally happens organically, like getting a cup of coffee, and also thinking about the ethical piece too. I think that's a really good point as well. So thank you guys for sharing that. We have about 15 more minutes. So with your permission, I'm going to be a little bit more brisk, and I'll go through the next 3, and then we'll pause and I'll see if you have anything to talk about. All right. So we are on the top 3. I feel like this is like American Idol or something. I wish I had a commercial I could tease you with and then say, come back in 2 minutes, but I won't. So challenge number 3, this is huge. It's leading change and cultural transformation. And one of the interesting things, so this is a long time ago, and Professor Wood and I actually worked at the House of Representatives together. And we had a change initiative there. And we had little buttons that we gave everyone. And it said, IIMJ, ask me. And IIMJ stood for, it is my job. So the part of the House that we worked with provided all the services to the members in Congress. And just by giving people a button and giving them a little bit of training, we were able to get them to feel more connected to what this cultural transformation would look like. And they became your change coalition and agents of change. So if you're trying to move the needle, if you're trying to redefine what your culture looks like, trying to find who are those people that can be, I don't want this to sound like a negative thing, but those people that can be your cheerleaders and your agents of change and your change champions, and finding ways to build a coalition to get them to help communicate what's the change. And the biggest thing, why? Why is it important that we change? I think a lot of change management initiatives, they really fall down on what the why is, and that's super important. So as leaders, if you're trying to change the culture, if you're trying to change the way that you work remotely, if you're trying to raise the bar on the goals that we all have to achieve, you have to role model that. So encourage yourself, motivate yourself, and encourage other leaders to model the way. Share and inspire a shared vision. Challenge processes. This is a really interesting one. If you're trying to change, it's not just adding things that have to be done. It's knowing what are the processes that maybe they're not as effective or pertinent or relevant as they were a few years ago. How do we say no to those? And how do we help other people generate the ideas that we can say yes to? And then finally, a great way to lead change and help with cultural transformation, and this comes from, I believe, John Cotter, is you have to take a look at what's going on, you have to melt it or unfreeze, figure out what the change will look like, and that takes a lot of leadership, a lot of strategic planning, a lot of guidance. Once you develop that, you freeze it all together, you launch it, and then you evaluate to see if it works. So leading change and cultural transformation. One of the things I want to say, I know I'm talking a little bit fast, but everything that we're talking through, I have this infographic that I will share with you at the end. It has a deep dive on the top 5 challenges, including what does that challenge look like and what are some considerations that you can do. So a lot of this is in a 2-page infographic handout that I am delighted to share with you when we're done. All right, so one of my favorite psychiatrists is Carl Jung, and he had said that all the greatest and the most important problems on life are fundamentally insolvable. They express the necessary polarity, and they can never be solved, but only outgrown. So it's not about solving problems, it's about taking a look at polarity management. And basically, polarity management in a nutshell is what are 2 things that typically it's difficult to make them happen at the same time. I need to get results in a week, but make sure that my employees are happy and not stressed. It's like, gosh, that's a really difficult continuum to balance. I need to balance the results and the people. I need to manage virtually, but I also have to be able to figure it out in the office. And again, it's not about being right or wrong, but it's trying to look at different extremes from both sides of the fence to demonstrate really good leadership. Focus on the business results and the health of employees, and conduct reoccurring support meetings. Again, because everyone has to do so many things, some of these priorities are a little bit competing, making sure that you as a leader are creating the time and the space to make sure that you're able to support your team. And finally, number 1, create an engaged culture. So again, this is absolutely huge. But one of the things that I really, really like, and it's part of my personal philosophy, is if you're trying to build an engaged culture, you have to focus on 2 things. There's the rational commitment and the emotional commitment. The rational commitment is things like, I need to get a paycheck. I need to feel that my compensation and my benefits are appropriate for what I do. I need to kind of put food on the table for my family. But then the emotional commitment is, again, making sure that the janitor mopping the floor is really aligned with what's the mission of your organization? What is it that you're trying to do? So it's balancing the rational commitment with emotional commitment two things that as leaders, it's imperative that you assess, either with a formal culture survey or just by asking people what they need and what they want. Asking employees and then listening to them, thinking outside happy hours. So I heard a comedian a couple of weeks ago talking about, oh, all these companies, like, to build engagement, they have these happy hours, and maybe it's a Zoom happy hour these days, maybe it's face-to-face, but the comedian said that's one of the worst things you can do. You take a group of disgruntled employees, give them alcohol, and think that that's going to like help with their engagement. He called it a push-up bra, which I thought was kind of interesting. So when you're trying to think of ways to build the culture and make sure that people are engaged, finding out what works for them. Rich Carlton asks employees simple questions on their first day. What's your favorite soft drink? What's your favorite candy bar? Which do you prefer, bonuses or time off? And just finding out what people want and using that to lead your employees is super important. Acknowledge people and recognize. Again, some people like to be recognized privately, some people publicly, but really, is there a program or an initiative that you can do to help build culture through recognition? So long story short, when I was 18, I started my career in telemarketing. And we had this potato of the hour reward. It was like a, quarter potato. And we would literally put it on top of the desk of the agent that had the most sales. And it's so crazy how something as silly as a quarter potato would just get so much energy and passion. And it really helped us kind of solidify and build that reinforcement, healthy, motivative culture. I thought that was just kind of a neat little trick that I did. So maybe you guys have the potato or something that works for you. And then finally, number 6, develop an engagement strategy and plan. So for those of you that are looking to build this out in your organization, this requires a little bit more work. So it's bringing others together to try to define what are the goals of the business and how does that engagement look from your employees across departments, across teams, to make sure that everyone is marching towards that goal and building a culture along the way. All right, so we have 6 more minutes, and I think I'm doing okay on managing time. Let me just open up the conversation here for any comments, reactions, or questions. And I do see that there's a comment in the chat pod, a company called, pardon my French, but I do like a dirty word here and there, Big Ass Fans, opens their beer fridge when they meet their daily sales goals, and the employees can raid the fridge that has lots of beers and hard seltzers. That's a great idea. Be careful with the alcohol, but again, I love that. It's doing simple little things. I know Google, I think they call it the Google 20. They give free lunch, they give free snacks, they give free drinks. So again, it's a great way to keep employees, at the company and not like driving to 7-Eleven or something to go get a candy bar. So simple things like that, or opening the beer fridge is something good. So thank you for sharing that. What other comments or questions do you have before we start kind of the wrap up phase of this?
I kind of like Daniel Pink's model of autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
Yeah.
As an engagement for people, because I've found that aligns pretty much with the ways that I have felt engaged over my career. So autonomy is really just, and if you guys may have heard of this or read his book, Drive, but autonomy is really about having some measure of control over your job, whether it's where you work or when you work, who you work with, or what you work on. Mastery is just the ability to continue to develop yourself so that you feel like you're growing in your career. And purpose is just, I'm contributing to that higher order, that larger purpose of an organization. So if the organization really supports more of a societal purpose, or they adopt something like Patagonia adopts sort of an environmental mindset, and that they develop all their products around something like that, that attracts and retains people because they're wedded to that purpose. And so if you touch like 2 or all 3 of those, you're going to hold on to people because they feel really satisfied and fulfilled in their work.
I love it. And Daniel Pink is just a great thought leader. So yeah, definitely focusing on autonomy, finding ways to kind of, you know, grow and evolve. And that's great. Any other resources that anyone would like to suggest? I invite you to just kind of put some things that you feel are good, like Daniel Pink's book Drive, or any other items that can really help leaders deal with some of the challenges today. Bridges for Change. Thank you, Cheryl. All right, so here's the 10 list. We've talked about the 5 most important. I'm going to ask my wonderful co-host Shane if you'd be willing to post a way that we can all get access to the infographic. So again, that has kind of the executive summary of how did we do this project, as well as what are some ideas that you have. So that is my complimentary gift to you, valued at nothing, because I don't charge for it. So, all right. So I want to talk to you a little bit about this new program that's called Catalyst Plus. It's a white glove development program. It includes content around these 10 challenges. So if you, maybe someone you know, maybe it's someone in your organization, is really trying to step up their leadership skills, I think this is going to be an amazing program. It includes, like I said, the content around how do you deal with these 10 challenges. It includes a 360-degree feedback, a Hogan, some other assessments, so that we can present everything on the table, look at that leader, and put together a customized development plan. And the program lasts for 5 months. It could go a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. And we have an opening for about 5 leaders per quarter. And like I said, Q1 will start in January. So if you're interested in learning more, kindly reach out to me and we will do that. Also, the Foolproof Development Plan is available on l4learningsolutions.com. That's a great place to get it. You can flip through it online, and you can also download it. And the last thing we're going to do before we select our winner is if you have a phone and you want to, and I'll send these slides out to you too. If you want to scan the QR code, this will take you to a flow page that gives you everything to know about L4 Learning Solutions. So I think we are ready to randomly give our, oh, and I see the 100-person project just got, and yes, the book should be in the chat pod. So you should be able to download the ebook Foolproof Development Planning. All right, and let me just push this to see who our winner is. Dun, da, da, da. Someone give me a drum roll. All right, it looks like Shri is the winner of the Catalyst Plus package. So congratulations to Shri. If anyone else is interested, you know, please reach out to me. It's been a privilege and an honor to work with you. Thank you so much for your engagement, your curiosity, for showing up. Hopefully this has helped a couple ideas bubble to the surface, and I hope you have some ideas on how you can either lead yourself, lead your team, lead your organizations. And again, if there's anything I can do to support you, please let me know. And again, thank you so much for joining us to the 10 challenges of today's leaders. And hopefully you found at least a couple things to do about it. We will send you a survey. I'd love to get your feedback. And I wish all of you a wonderful rest of your day or evening, wherever you may be located. And hopefully our paths will cross again soon. So thank you so much, everyone. Bye. And I'll stay on if anyone has any questions or wants to talk or anything. So drop off if you got to go.